This is Rosemary from Huntington, New York. Rosemary voted in the general election in 2022. Unfortunately, Rosemary died in 2021, 1 year before she voted. Of course, this photo is not really that of Rosemary, God bless her soul, but it emphasizes the point. Rosemary was joined by others who appear to have voted after their death. This includes Richard from Babylon, Mary from Amityville, Edward from Oakdale, Phyllis from Merrick, Virginia from Hicksville, and many more. Now, how do we know this? Over the last few years, researchers with Project Civica have spent hundreds of man-hours analyzing the New York State voter rolls, looking for such anomalies, and identifying problems in the election registration process. The reviewers are experts in data analysis and have obtained the voter data from the New York State Board of Elections. This diagram shows the source of the voter data. Once an application to register to vote is completed, it is submitted to the local Board of Elections. There are 62 county boards of election in New York State. Once the application is processed, the information is forwarded to the New York State Board of Elections, which adds the registrant to the state voter rolls. This data forms the New York State voter rolls, which presently contains about 21 million records on voters. Of that, only 14 million are considered active voters, those permitted to vote in New York State. The researchers periodically requested this data from the state for analysis. The data was then put into an Excel format to allow for an analysis of the data. The Excel format is a common tool used for forensic analysis of data. Here, we are going to focus on Suffolk County data. Suffolk County is one of the 62 boards of elections in New York State. This is data for Suffolk County, obtained from the state voter rolls, which when analyzed by our researchers, shows a history of votes being cast by people who apparently were dead. The data is arranged in rows and columns and was received during 3 different time periods. This is a typical row showing voter data. Next, we will look at the columns. Now, the first column, self-explanatory, contains the first name of the voter. The second column contains the last name, which has been truncated for privacy purposes. The third column contains the State Board of Elections number, ID number, which is issued by New York State Board of Elections. This number is unique. Each New York State voter gets only one of these numbers for life. Next column is the date of birth. That's the date the voter was born on. Now, this column contains the date the voter died. The researchers combed over death certificates, obituaries, and other publicly available information to confirm the death. This column contains the voting history obtained from the New York State Board of Elections on November 20th of 2023. There were approximately 21 million records in all. So let's just expand the column to give you an idea of the additional history that's available. We can also take a look at the voter history sheet. Remember, this is only about 40 of the 21 million records that were downloaded. We really only need the most recent history, so we'll collapse the column back down and save some screen space in the meantime. This column contains the voting history data obtained from the New York State Board of Elections on August 6, 2024. That's about 8 months after the data in the previous column. It will reflect any additional votes or changes to the voting history since then. And this column contains the data obtained from the New York State Board of Elections on November 13, 2024. That's about 3 months later. So now we have a history of the voting records, including November 20th, 2023, August 6th, 2024, and November 13th, 2024, which is just after the last presidential election. Now we can compare the voting history, who voted, when they voted, and the method of voting. Let's take a look at the first voter. Now this is Rosemary. Rosemary was born on May 1st, 1942, and she passed away on July 20th, 2021. According to the voter history from November 20th, 2023, Rosemary voted in 2022. So that's 1 year after Rosemary passed away. So that's a problem. And then we see the next voter history from August 6, 2024. That's about 8 months later. It confirms that Rosemary voted in 2022 in person. That's what the P stands for. She voted in person. So once again, that's problematic. It was a year after she passed away. But then 3 months later, you see the data, November 13th, 2024, and we see that the history of that previous voting from the 2022 election has been erased. So the question is, who erased it and why did they erase it? These are changes in the state voter rolls, but the data originates from the counties. Is the county involved in these changes in the voter history? Are they even aware of it? This needs to be addressed. Now the next voter, Richard, he was born on January 6th, 1935, and he passed away on May 3rd, 2022. Now when we look at the voting history from November 20th, 2023, we see that Richard voted in 2022 in the early election that the E stands for. Unfortunately, that is after he passed away. The general election is in November, and he died in May. So that's a problem. We look at the next set of data, and we see that Richard voted in the primary election in 2024. Once again, that's after he passed away. So that's problematic, and it also confirms that he voted in 2022 after he passed away. The primary election was in person, which is very interesting. That's not really feasible. So we move to the next set of data, and we see that the history has been erased once again. So the record of him voting in 2024 and 2022 is gone, and all we see is the 2020 election that he voted in. Now we look at Mary. Mary was born in December 27th, 1934, and she passed away on February 14th of 2022. However, she managed to vote going to the next set of data in 2023 using an absentee ballot. That's what the A stands for. So once again, that's after she passed away, so that's not really feasible. Then we see that she voted in the general election in 2022 using absentee ballot. Well, the election was in November, and she passed away in February. So once again, she voted after she died. And the next set of data just confirms that information. That was 8 months later about. Then we go to the next set of data, which is just after the last election in 2024. And we notice all that data about her voting is gone. It's been erased. The question is, who did that and why? And this pattern follows through. We see Edward has a similar problem, Luciano a similar problem, where they're voting after they've passed away. So there's something wrong with the records here. So let's move down to Cynthia. Cynthia is a very interesting case, right? Because Cynthia has 3 records. 1, 2, 3. And this shows that Cynthia was born in March 26, 1933. But she passed away on June 30th, 2022. All three records are the same here. And it shows that she voted in the general election in 2023 using an absentee ballot. This is, of course, 1 year after she passed away. So that's problematic. Then it also shows that she voted in the general election in 2022 using an early ballot. Okay, once again, this election was in November. She passed away in June. This means she voted after she passed away. The next set of data shows that just confirms the previous information that she voted in 2023 and 2022. Once again, in the November 13th, 2024 data, the voting history was erased. Records of the 2022 and 2023 votes are gone. Now we look at Cynthia again, and we see that she's voted once again in 2023. And then her third record shows the same thing. She voted in 2023. So this is problematic. So the question is, how did this happen? How did she end up with three records? It might help us to take a look at the state voter ID number. Let's take a look at that number. Now you can see Cynthia has a state voting ID number ending in 8560 for her first record. And in her second record, she has a different state voter ID number dated with the last four digits of 1948. And the third record has the same state voter ID number as the previous record. So there's two different state voter ID numbers issued here. One ending in 8560, one ending in 1948. So the question is, how did that happen? And that's problematic because we know that you only receive one state voter ID number for the life of your voting. Here we have some additional information which may answer some of the questions. In the first column is the status of the voter. Now the voter is either active or purged. Purged basically means inactive. So the A stands for active and the P stands for purged. So any voters that have passed away should be purged. In this case, we look at Gina. She's been purged, and the purge date was December 14th, 2023. She actually passed away in October, so it took them 2 months to purge her. And the reason for the purging, of course, is death. It says so right here. If in fact these other people have passed away, the status should reflect that. And instead of being, in case of Rosemary, instead of being active, it should be a P for purged. And they should give the date when the purge was done, and the reason would, of course, be death. But that hasn't been done. It hasn't been done for any of these people here who appear to have passed away. So that's a problem with the data. It goes for Jean and Frank and Susan and Peter. Okay. So further down, we see Lois. Lois was purged. She was purged on January 2nd, 2024. And it looks like she passed away in October of 2023. So it took them several months to get the purge date in there. And the reason for the purge, of course, was death. So that's the way the data should work. That is not what's happening here. Now, in the case of Cynthia, if you remember, had 3 records. Now, the first record was purged. It was purged on March 22nd of 2009. It was apparently purged because of an issue with the National Voter Registration Act, the NVRA. That's a federal law passed in 1993, also known as the Motor Voter Law. But we don't know what the problem was. Now, what's interesting about this is that she was purged in 2009, but still managed to vote in 2023. So that's definitely problematic. Then we also notice that she received that state voter ID number, which was issued before 2009, even though she probably already had a state voter ID number. Now, on the next record, Cynthia also was purged, and she was purged because she moved. But they gave no date as to when she moved. The fact that she moved explains why there are two of the same state voter ID numbers in her second and third records. Because when you move, you keep your state voter ID number, but you get a new county voter ID number, which she has. But what this doesn't explain is why she received the first state voter ID number ending in 8560 and is still listed as active when it appears she's deceased. Okay, let's take a look back at Lois. Now, Lois had two records, but we also noticed that Lois had two state voter ID numbers, different state voter ID numbers. The first one ended in 8504, and the second one ended in 9261. Now, there's no indication as to why there are two different state voter ID numbers. However, it's possible that Lois is two different people. Even though the data seems to indicate it's the same person, it's feasible that she could be two different people, accounting for the two different state voter ID numbers. To be certain about this, we'd need the Social Security number and signature of Lois. New York State Board of Elections has this information, but does not release it to the public. These problems identified by the researchers are just the tip of the iceberg. As we see, the researchers have found numerous anomalies. Most recently, they have found the history of felons voting while incarcerated. All these anomalies, when taken separately, do not appear to be enough to sway an election. However, when taken together, they show a systemic problem with the voter rolls and a cumulative impact. Other researchers have found evidence of algorithms embedded in the voter rolls. The state has no record of why these algorithms were placed there or who created them. Algorithms can be used to manipulate votes. In any event, it's time for public officials to step up and do their jobs. There is a state and national movement to update state and federal voting laws. In New York State, there are several bills pending, including Voter Integrity and Verification Act, the New York Poll Watcher Bill, and a data bill. On the federal level, Congress is looking at revising the Help America Vote Act and the National Voter Registration Act. Project Civica is willing to work with them. So contact your local officials and tell them it's time to bring back confidence to our elections.